Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the second of our Headless e-commerce masterclass webinars. My name's Mike. I'm moderating this session today so that you get maximum value. We've got a discussion session after the module summaries and case studies when our experts will answer your questions. Just to let you know, your question function is live, so you can submit questions during the slides. Based on our first webinar, we do get a lot of questions asked, so we may not get to yours, but we will outreach to you individually if we don't get a chance. I'll now hand over to my colleague Tim McMillan, who will introduce the rest of the team and provide you with the webinar overview. Thanks, guys. Over to you, Tim.
Thanks, Mike, and good morning, everybody. As Mike said, I'm Tim McMillan. I'm a Director of Digital Delivery here at Profound. For those of you who don't know us, we're a digital experience transformation agency, and we deliver high-value customer experience transformations on digital for our customers fast. I'm joined today by one of our partners, James from commercetools. James, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm the UK Business Director of commercetools. commercetools is the fastest growing enterprise commerce platform in the world, and we were the first headless cloud-native commerce platform when we launched 6 years ago. So we have customers like AT&T, Volkswagen Group, and Tiffany. And in the UK, we work with Boots, Specsavers, Vision Express, Holland Barrett, Moonpig, Moo, Pret a Manger, to name a few. And today I'll be telling the migration story of Burberry and Lego.
Great. Thanks, James. Thanks. So just to give you a bit of insight into our agenda today, what we're going to be running through, I'm going to start with a very short recap of this headless e-commerce program to date, and then focusing in on a summary of the module 3 and module 4 components that we put together. Then James will run through a couple of the relevant case studies that will hopefully bring some of the things to life that we'll be speaking about in module 3 and 4 summaries. We'll answer a couple of questions that we received in advance of the webinar today, but don't worry, we are going to be taking questions at the very end in our discussion section. So if there's anything that you want to ask either now or as you go through the webinar with us this morning, please fire them off through the question facility that you have on GoToWebinar there, and Mike, our moderator, will present them to us at the end of the session today. At the very end, we'll be summarising the summary and then giving you a little bit of a look ahead to what's coming up in modules 5 and 6 before we get into that discussion. Okay, so let's just begin. For those of you who have joined the program partway through, I just want to give you guys a quick overview of this program, what it's all about, really. This is a program really designed to help you understand how you can help your businesses transform through periods of adversity like we're experiencing at the moment. We don't know whether there'll be another COVID lockdown period or what else might come out of the woodwork in the years to come, but we do know that it's important that we prepare ourselves with the right skills across the business from a digital marketing and technical perspective to make sure that we're transforming our e-commerce businesses to be able to react faster to the changing needs of customers, whatever the drivers are for those changes in their experience needs. And hopefully through the program, you'll be empowered to actually start planning a strategy to help you make the changes that you need to keep up with your competitors and also to keep up with the expectations of your customers. We've built this module to be delivered in a kind of a piecemeal way, so we're not overwhelming you with information all the way through. So we have about 8 modules in total, taking you through all of the elements you need to consider if you are planning a transformation to a more modern e-commerce technology stack. We release a couple of modules every month. We're at module 3 and 4 today. In last month's webinar, we actually ran through the summary of reimagining retail commerce and replatforming, which was modules 1 and 2. If for those of you that missed it, that video of that webinar is actually available on our website. You can watch it at any time, and we will be putting a recording of today's up on the website too once we've completed it. But please do use the website. There's other resources apart from the videos. We've got the white papers that support each module, as well as some technical information and some blogs that bring to life some of the concepts that we've been talking about in these sessions. So module 3. Module 3 was really intended to help you understand the drivers behind the need to migrate to an e-commerce platform. And there can be many reasons for needing to migrate, but the one that we normally bump into most frequently with our clients is that just their legacy platforms, the legacy e-commerce platform cannot respond fast enough to change. And we know that brands that can adapt to periods of disruption fastest are the ones who often move ahead of their competitors, regardless of whatever the status quo was before that period of disruption. So if you're finding yourself in a situation where you can't scale or keep up with competitors, or can't deliver the experience that your customers are asking you to do because of constraints from your platform, then it's probably about the time to start thinking about moving on to a new platform. And module 3 is about helping you understand how you can go through that process of migration.
So Tim, I'm wondering whether it's time to ask the audience whether they've actually migrated platforms in the past. Should we run a quick poll and find out?
Yeah, go for it, Mike. Yeah.
Okay, all right then. Well, on your screens now, we've got a poll. It'd be really interesting to find out what your experience, or at least whether we've got anyone in the audience who's actually done a platform migration in the past, and if you have, how recently it was, because your experience 5 years ago could be quite different from what it is today. Okay, so I think we've got votes from everybody. And this is the result. That's really interesting. So we've got nobody who has done a platform migration within the last 3 years. And actually, it looks like most of you have not gone through a platform migration at all. So, well, you're totally at the right place. So anyway, Tim, do you want to carry on?
Yeah, that is interesting insight, actually, because I'm not surprised, actually, because platform migrations used to be things that people used to dread. They're considered to be quite mammoth and often painful undertakings, and something that is so large and fundamental and cause such fundamental disruption to our businesses that we often would only consider to do them every kind of 4 or 5 years or so because of the amount of upheaval that's involved. But that's not the case anymore. The technology has moved on quite a lot in the last few years, and there are better options for replatforming now than there used to be. You don't have to go for that big bang all-in-one massive kind of upheaval replatforming project. There are options to help you have a more flexible and measured approach to migration, which will actually help you achieve your goals faster with far less pressure and upheaval too. So that's really the key things here from this module 3 about platform migration. It's about helping you understand the choices that you have and how you can actually start delivering on your plans for migration. And I'm just going to call out to a survey that we mentioned in our module 3 white paper, actually, and it was an Ecom Insight survey, and 42% of the retailers who were surveyed actually said they intended to replatform their core e-commerce technology in 2020. And I find that quite interesting, because now is a really good time to be thinking about replatforming. If your replatforming life cycle is falling around about now, it's probably the best time that it ever has been to actually be looking at different options and different ways to actually achieve those migration goals. And we'll run through some of the reasons why in the rest of this session here. So just moving on to the key lessons that we try to deliver through module 3. First one being to help you understand the key drivers behind platform migration initiatives. Now, these drivers could be things such as pressure from competitors and disruptors, or perhaps your customer insight is telling you that your customers' expectations are increasing and they're getting better experiences on other websites or other brands. Maybe you're actually considering switching to a new business model. We have encountered in the last few years quite a few B2B organizations who traditionally would only sell through channel, through wholesalers and retailers, etc. But now they're actually considering going direct to customer, and they need new technology to help them do that and also unlock those kind of advantages from a profit margin point of view. So that's another important driver for why some people decide to replatform. And finally, technology might be the main reason behind your decision to need to replatform. Perhaps your old platform is just too hard to maintain or adapt to the changing needs of your customers, or it's becoming too expensive to upgrade. So those are things just to bear in mind, and we go into more detail around each of those things in our white paper. We also take you through learning how a phased platform migration can probably better support the needs of your business, as well as learning how to plan that effective phased platform migration. And by phased migration, we just mean really breaking the project down and delivering it in a more iterative way rather than big bang. So essentially, you're eating the elephant one bite at a time, and by doing so, you actually reduce operational disruption and risk. and we'll demonstrate some of the principles behind that in this session as well. And then following on from there, final couple of key lessons is about understanding the key technical considerations that would underpin a successful migration, and learning how to make your digital platform as future-proof as possible. We want to try and get us out of that cycle that we've been going through for the last 20 years of big bang re-platforming exercises every 4 or 5 years, because that's pretty much the lifespan of your technology. There are better options now and better ways to actually make choices that future-proof you, so that you're not having to replace everything in one go every time you need to change something. You can actually just start thinking about replacing small component parts of your digital ecosystem one bit at a time, without the risk and the upheaval of that big bang program that we would have traditionally gone through. So 4 steps just to wrap up on module 3 that you should have as key takeaways from going through the module. First one is you need to define the factors underpinning your platform migration ideas, then plan and implement a phased migration, and then maintain forward momentum by accommodating new solutions in your digital estate. So you're just thinking iteratively and bringing on faster time to value by bringing in new solutions to your ecosystem one bit at a time, rather than trying to do everything in one big go. So use module 3 to help you decide the right technical approach for your brand at this point in time, and to also understand how headless platforms can be more flexible and deliver results faster. So we had a couple of questions, as I mentioned, that came in advance of the webinar today. Mike, did you want to just run through them?
Yeah, sure. So what we did before the webinar was ask all of the students, your fellow students, to submit their questions, and we had a couple of quite interesting ones. I'm going to read these out mainly for the benefit of the recording. So the first one was, when planning for resource, what's the minimum number of stakeholders that need to be included for a project like this? So Tim, tell us about stakeholders.
Yeah, I don't think there is a magic minimum number. I think there is a right number, and I think you just have to accept that with modern kind of e-commerce businesses, whether that business is pure play e-commerce or multi-channel, it's unlikely that the e-commerce channel is going to have no impact on any other part of the business. You're going to need to get engagement from stakeholders right across the business, be that from digital marketing, e-commerce, IT, operations. All of those teams are going to be impacted by any kind of platform migration or change, and you don't want to leave it too late to bring those guys into the fold when thinking of a project like this. So you need their buying and their support from the beginning, and that will help you have a much more frictionless experience as you migrate, but you also get to support their needs too. So really, it's not about the minimum number of stakeholders, it's about finding the right stakeholders and making sure they're engaged and supportive of a project like this.
Okay, thank you, Tim. The next question was interesting. We had a lot of people ask something similar to this. A big bang approach worked well in the past. Why wouldn't it work well now? Just to give a little bit of context, I think the thrust of most people's questions was, well, you know, the last time we did do a platform migration, it was from one monolithic legacy solution to another one. It took a while, but it worked. So why should a more phased headless approach be more effective? So Tim, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess how successful your big bang implementations were is quite subjective and specific to each individual's experience. I mean, we've seen projects where it gets really tense at the very end. You don't know whether it's going to work or not until you push the button to launch, and sometimes you have to roll back, and you know, months and months and months of work have come down to a lot of activity at the very end, and that's quite risky. So eventually most projects do get there, but some of them don't always succeed and get into production in the timescales that you hope you would achieve. I think from my point of view with this sort of question, it's not really about whether a big bang approach would work well or not now. It's more about how comfortable you would be as a digital business growing big bang. We know that those big bang projects can take, you know, anything up to a couple of years to realize, and the world can change a lot in those 2 years of that project. And if you're on a kind of a fixed price, fixed scope, big bang project, it can be really hard to change direction and respond to change throughout that program, because you're constantly driving to a launch date. And you have to be comfortable that your competitors may not be working in the same way, and if they are, replatforming already have a more kind of modern microservices-led architecture, it's more than likely they'll be able to respond to change and adversity a lot faster than you'll be able to through that period of a big bang kind of project migration.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Tim. So I think next we've got your summary of Module 4.
Yes, we do indeed. So moving on to Module 4, and just a reminder, guys, if you've got questions of anything we're talking about today, do pop them into the questions feature, and we'll get to them at the end of the session here. But moving on to Module 4. Module 4 is really all about helping you understand what that journey from monolithic to microservices as an architectural concept is really like and about. And following Module 3, you may have already decided that you're pretty convinced that a more modern e-commerce platform approach is the way to go for your business. And Module 4 will help you understand more about the detail behind that microservices approach and how you can move from a legacy monolithic platform to that more modern microservices architecture. So key lessons that we have from Module 4 is, first off, it helps you really understand the conceptual differences between monolithic and microservices architectures. Now, we did have some feedback from our first webinar last month that some people were still fairly unfamiliar with what the differences were between monolithic and microservices. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of clarity to that now on this session. What we've got on the screen here is just an illustration of how you could think of a monolithic piece of software or platform. And it's basically one single application or piece of software which does everything inside its kind of boundaries. They can have lots of good features and be very powerful, but everything is really tightly coupled together, which can make it very complicated to live with and to work with and to change. And you often have to have quite a lot of knowledge and experience to get the best out of these suites of technology. And what we often see here is that people don't end up using the full suite of capabilities of a monolithic platform. They'll use just kind of 15–20% of its capability because it's just too difficult to learn or to get to grips with the wider capabilities of a suite. And another important point about monolithic platforms or suites is that they tend to only control one front-end experience. And what we mean by that is that if you had a website and a mobile app and perhaps a kiosk in store, you'd normally find that you'd be having one monolithic application powering and driving each of those experiences on the front end. And this just means quite obviously that if every time you add a new kind of channel or customer experience on the front end, that you're going to have to add a new suite, and that's going to increase the maintenance overhead, the administrative overhead, and can also make it harder for you to keep the experiences consistent because you're going to have to do the work in several places rather than doing it in one place. And that's really the difference between monolithic and a headless approach. With a headless approach, what we've got here is an example just to demonstrate to you that what it allows you to do is actually select the technology that you need that's right for you. We call it like best of breed for what you need to do. So you can choose the right DAM, the right PIM, the right e-commerce engine, the right website CMS, and then bridge all of those things together in a fairly straightforward way through an API layer. And you would use that API layer then to bring information from those back office systems, those PIMs, those DAMs, those e-commerce platforms, to the front end experiences that we have on our websites or our mobile apps. So here in this scenario, you can get into a situation where you only need to do updates in one place and make those changes once, and they can appear across all of your front end experiences relatively painlessly, so long as the API layer is well thought out. And another good advantage of a microservices approach in general is that you can actually make changes to independent parts of your ecosystem without worrying about the impact on everything else within your digital estate there. So if you find a problem with conversion rate on your website, you can just go in and fix that without worrying about whether it's going to impact your back office systems in any other way or any other front end channel. And this also lends itself to giving you a bit more of that future proofness that we know people are looking for at the moment, so that if your needs in 2 years' time are different to what they are today, and you need to have a different PIM or a different commerce platform behind the scenes, you can just actually swap out those individual component parts without having to do those kind of big bang all-in-one replatforming exercises. You can just do them piecemeal as and when you need to, if you need to. So getting back to our key lessons, the second one we hope you walk away with is to understand how monolithic and microservices architecture can impact platform performance and brand competitiveness. And I often find this quite useful just to think about this in context of monolithic platforms. By their very nature, they are generally more complex and do require more maintenance and testing. And that kind of overhead can actually divert your digital teams away from adding real value. So they stop actually focusing on trying to improve the customer experience and business outcomes, and they become teams that just end up keeping the platform alive, keeping the lights on, and doing updates and maintenance and bug fixes. So in a microservices space, you actually can start bringing your teams back into doing more value add activities on your customer, for your customers, through customer experience innovations, rather than just being kind of life support mode for your platforms. Moving on from there, we also hope that you understand that through Module 4, you'll find out how microservices enable organizations to adapt their service offering to changing market demands. This is because everything is decoupled with a microservices approach. It actually enables you to respond faster when the unexpected does happen or a new opportunity presents itself. So in the Module 4 white paper, you'll get some examples there about how you can get that competitive advantage through choosing a microservices approach by being able to be more agile as a business. And we also help you to understand the opportune times to start considering to migrate away from monolithic architecture. There are a couple of real obvious opportune times here. The first one being you might be coming up to a license renewal on your current platform, and you may find that actually at point of renewal you will need to upgrade, and that upgrade process can often be quite expensive and quite complicated, and you don't often get any real value out of it. You don't end up changing the experience overall. You just end up trying to recreate the experience you've got in the new version of the platform. So if you end up in that situation, we would challenge you just to think a little bit about why would you bother to do that when actually you could do a completely fresh replatform and actually think about creating the best experience and bringing that to life in a more faster, more agile way. And then finally, understanding the benefits of how to implement a phased migration. And that's really about understanding that a phased migration enables you to deliver innovation faster and be more agile and more flexible and get faster time to value. And just to kind of bring that to life a little bit, I've just got a slide here just to show you very, very kind of generally speaking, the differences between the program lengths when you're replatforming a monolithic to a monolithic versus when you're going to replatform from a monolithic to a headless. What you'll see there is we would normally expect you to be in kind of a design and build cycle for a couple of years before you actually launch anything on a monolithic program. But if you did go for a headless approach, the very nature of the headless stack means that you can actually get stuff released a lot faster. And we're working on a couple of projects at the moment where we've actually managed to bring value to our clients within 6 months, and then continue to iterate and improve on the experiences that we're delivering through data and insight that we've gained through the improvements that we've been making. And what you can end up achieving is that by the time you get to the equivalent point in the timeline where you would probably be launching the monolithic platform for the first time, you'd have done dozens of releases in the headless approach, and you'd have actually got much more value out of it because you'll be learning as you go, responding to changes as they arrive, and continuing to get support from the business as well, because they're actually seeing their investment returning value much more frequently and much faster than they have previously. And just to wrap up now on Module 4, just the kind of the technical preparations that you'll be able to be empowered to consider. First one being, which of the functions in your monolithic solution have become redundant, either through the fact of upgrades or the fact that you just never use them and you don't need them. So when you're thinking about preparing an equivalent microservices-led architecture and platform, you only want to be really recreating the functions or the capabilities that add value and that you actually need. You don't need to be looking for a suite that's got 101 whistles and bells when you only need 20 or 30 features. Secondly, how can microservices architecture improve your brand's agility? So this is all about trying to understand how much faster you can move with innovation compared to if you're in a monolithic platform situation. And what we often challenge our clients to do is to think about the things they want to achieve in the next couple of years, and then plan that out in the way they would usually have done it. and then work with a partner like ourselves to actually create an alternative kind of program roadmap. And following a very short discovery engagement, we can very quickly get to a point where we can demonstrate how a headless approach can actually start achieving your goals faster than you perhaps you appreciate you could do if you stuck with a monolithic platform. And final thing here to understand is how a microservices architecture can improve your development team's productivity and the creativity of your marketing team. And this is all about being able to cut out all of that low value live support work, as we call it, and actually get on to fixing experience challenges and driving innovation to the front end to your customers, listening to what they need and responding to it as quickly as you can. Okay, that's just about it for modules 3 and 4, but probably a good time now, James, for you to jump on and actually bring some of this stuff to life with the stories that you've brought along today.
That's great. Thanks very much, Tim. And if I could just add that all of the past modules 1 to 4, all of the white papers and supporting technical documents and blogs, they're all available on the profound.works website. So you can go back and review any of the content that Tim's been talking about today. So James is now going to tell us about some really interesting customer stories. As Tim said, it's actually bringing this technology to life. And these are about a couple of really quite exciting brands. And I have to say, one very close to my heart, Lego. And over to you, James.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, so I picked 2 brands, Lego and Burberry, because both brands that everybody knows, and they both have good sort of monolithic migration stories. There's a lot of parallels between the two. Both came from Oracle ATG to Commerce Tools, for example, but actually all our enterprise customers have a similar story of why they moved to us and this kind of modern tech approach. A couple of caveats before I begin. I picked 2 enterprise customers, as enterprise as the most relevant stories for this module. But we have companies of all sizes as customers those are kind of outgrowing Shopify and Magento. We've got all the way to the Legos and Burberrys who are on big enterprise technology stacks like Hybris, IBM, Salesforce, and Oracle. Also, as this is a Profound webinar and they compete with some of our other tech partners, I've had to talk about companies where the project strategy was mainly led by the retailers themselves. So they tend to be more technically mature customers with internal development teams. However, every time I talk about internal teams, that could just as easily be your tech partners team. Actually, the vast majority of our customers do full end-to-end implementations with their partners, not with internal teams. So just sort of keep that in mind as we go through these case studies. So for Lego, sort of in a nutshell, Lego wanted to move off a monolith because they needed speed, flexibility, and agility. The essence of the problem as they saw it was these big monolithic platforms bringing with them big budgets, big timelines, big complexity. All of those things are not what you want really nowadays. They wanted to be able to pivot, to change, to make choices, make small investments, run quick experiments, and they recognize that's how you get a competitive advantage in today's retail market. Another key driver was Headless. So they saw Headless as a mechanism to meet the consumer, the shopper, in the way that they as a brand wanted to meet them. And what was critical for them was disconnecting the nuts and bolts of doing things, so the commerce or whatever the back-end system is doing, so you have the freedom to do whatever you want on that interaction layer. So be that an app, a website, a clienteling device, you get absolute unlimited freedom to consumer service, to build an experience in a way that you want to do it. So moving on to the migration story. One of the key problems for Lego was their platform had gone down every year on Black Friday for 11 years, apart from once. And actually, the first Black Friday really tested our site reliability team as well. So we're a multi-tenant platform. That means all our customers share the same underlying engine, and we're always running about 50% headroom. So rather than customers all being in a little pond of resource, they're all in a big sea together. So if any customer gets a surprise spike, we have plenty of time to react to that and auto-scale the platform. However, with big events like Black Friday, we do ask our largest customers for some idea of expected load, as when you're dealing with those types of traffic spikes, auto-scaling is definitely not a magic wand. The actual traffic they sent us was, I think, it's an order of magnitude larger than what they told us. We dealt with it, and they were quite apologetic, and we found out actually that they had no idea what their Black Friday spike is. ATG had gone down way before they hit the true peak, so all those orders in the past probably were lost. So just give you an idea of kind of some of the stresses. So scale, reliability, the immediate issues, but also the inflexibility of the existing platform. The majority of their development and tech resource was going to keep the lights on to kind of on life support for this platform, and they really couldn't focus on doing all the cool stuff that they wanted to do. So they wanted to move to the new world. Some of the key motivations for that and the aims was, I say, reduce this burden of maintenance, not having to rely on doing what you can do, but focusing on what you should be doing. It's a real kind of mindset change. They wanted to make technology a competitive advantage, not just an enabler. They wanted to rent microservices, but build for differentiation. So that means looking at your architecture and saying, well, PIM, cart, order, promotions, they're just commoditized pieces of functionality. We don't want to own those. We don't want to maintain those. We want to buy that in as an API we don't have to maintain. And then we'll focus our SI or our development team on the 20% that makes Lego unique, and we'll own that, and that'll be part of our IP. And then finally, headless and cloud native. So as I said before, flexible and scalable is really, really core to what they were trying to do. So a bit about their migration story. They went for a true strangulation pattern, as we call it, rather than the big bang. In the past, you had a little choice with an ATG. Hybris weren't going to make it easier to move from one to the other, or IBM, etc. So you had to go for this high risk big bang strategy. Fundamentally, as Tim was saying, that means kind of creating this SOW, big massive document, handing it over to an SI or to your tech team, saying thank you very much. I'll see you in a year, see you in 18 months, and when what you get back in that time, it's probably not fit for purpose. The world has changed, customers' expectations has changed. With the strangulation approach, you're pulling out service by service, like pulling apart a Lego brick house, testing and validating as you go along. And then that way, as Tim was saying, you show value to the business much earlier, you reduce that project fatigue, and mainly you kind of reduce risk and learn as you go along. Lego is a good example of this approach. Overall, it took them about 9 months to move commerce sites from 80 countries and 20 languages to commerce tools. They started off with what was reasonably simple, was PIM, and quite closely connected to PIM is search. So they pushed that live first. They got that, they pulled that out of ATG, and actually they discovered that our search wasn't good enough. They wanted more functionality around merchandising, around boosting, around personalization. Our search is very much a find it, get it kind of search, and it's most of our customers use it, but it's not right for everyone. So in the next phase, they learn that as well as doing their identity management piece, they're also going to implement a third-party search. And it just shows you kind of the value of pushing live early and learning those lessons early on. And then they went on to tackle identity management. And then the second phase was more around the business critical checkout and payment journey. So they've learned all the lessons on the less critical stuff, and then they jump into the more critical stuff in the second. So that took about 3 or 4 months. Some of the lessons learned are sort of challenges. I think what we heard from Lego is one of the biggest challenges was not necessarily a technology one, it was a mindset change. As they move away from a monolith, and now you can change, and change can happen quickly. You have to move from being a thinking organization to a doing organization. So traditionally in technology projects, because they're so expensive, so complex, and come with so much risk, there's a huge amount of process needed in any decision. As you move away from monoliths and you can enact change quickly and cheaply, you can test, learn, and validate. And rather than talk about something, you can actually just do it. So Lego found this a bit of a transformation to make it work right. Teams are now working on decoupled services, so there's not a risk of what they're doing affecting the platform as much. So projects can run differently. And the challenge was more about making change a grassroots thing, more of a bottom up than a top down. And critically, what you need there is senior people who get this modern approach. We're happy to give specialist teams autonomy to build a service, to fix a problem, and to solve an issue themselves. And once they deliver those changes, you can get the data out, you can prove if it was the right decision or not, and if it wasn't, you can roll it back. So there's just less risk than what there used to be. However, Lego recognized that autonomy did come with some of its own challenges. You have to make sure you're getting what's required. That team's attention has to be focused in the right direction. So you've got to have quite a good product strategy. You've got to have a strong governance model around what you're building and why you're building it. And crucially, how each of these teams and the services they're building, how they connect with each other. If you don't get that mindset right about the services and the contracts between them, the APIs and the API layer, then you can think you're building decoupled microservices and you can swap things in and out, and then you start swapping things in and out, and it breaks. So that was really key. And another kind of learning, which sort of they didn't really think about up front, was in the same way you're breaking down monolithic systems in smaller parts, you also need to expect that you're not going to have monolithic relationships with vendors. You're going to have a retailer with dozens of suppliers doing dozens of different things. So the knowledge economy of the business changes because it's distributed, it's diverse, some of it's internal, some of it's external. And as a business, you need to kind of think about how you're going to deal with that. However, I think overriding what we hear from Lego was whatever some of the challenges around the knowledge economy, the real value is if something isn't working, you can just take it out and swap it out. And that's the real change when you're talking about this sort of best of breed vendor solution. So moving on to Burberry, as discussed before, had very similar motivations to Lego, as they wanted to move, this new world. As you can see from their key drivers, a lot of duplication in this slide. Same things with a slight different focus, I think. The key for them is that they wanted to own the front end. As discussed with Lego, there's this idea that you outsource, you rent the commoditized parts of your business, where there is no value in owning it. So the PIM, cart, order, promotions, you just want to buy that as an API, but you want to own the piece of technology that makes you unique and gives you that business advantage. And for Burberry, as a luxury retailer where personalization, personalized experience is so important, that means owning the front end. So their teams had already built a front end with and they wanted to work that, they wanted to work in a decoupled way. And then they wanted to work with an SI and best of breed partner technology to integrate the nuts and bolts. As they saw it, search, CMS, commerce, DAM, so digital asset management, their identity management, and their PIM. And going back to Lego point about the knowledge economy, that they wanted all the knowledge in-house for that front end, but the back end was less important, more of a commodity, more easily interchangeable, less need to worry about it. Another thing that was important for Lego, but probably much more important for Burberry, was this intelligence layer. So they wanted intelligence to power these bespoke personalized experiences. So they wanted all the data going through an API layer, as Tim was showing on that diagram, rather than the data being locked in different silo systems. They wanted the unified view of the customer. They wanted a single set of back-end services powering the different customer touch points in a headless way, which then allows them to kind of have that central view of data. They can also take that data, they can feed it into a data lake to get the insight they need. They can use it to train an AI personalization system. It's theirs to do what they want to do with. Localization, obviously with Burberry, China is very, very important, but further than that, it was the localization of having data centers closer to the customer. So you've got a data center in China, you've got one in Europe, you've got one in the US, and it increases improves the speed and the kind of experience you have for the customers. Also, the ability to spin up new environments, so the new languages, new taxes, new configurations for new regions, test that region very quickly, very cheaply. So it's kind of that business agility as well. And I think sort of a real key one here is that future flexibility on the second point, and that kind of leads me quite nicely into the migration story. So one of the biggest challenges of Burberry was they were stuck on an ancient version of ATG, and now we're missing out on updates, specifically security patches. This is something we hear from customers all the time. Yeah, they move from the more you customize a platform, the harder it is to move to a vendor's latest version, as Tim was saying. So a lot of the customization work you've done has to be redone at massive expense, and it's really hard to build a business case for that. So customers are stuck on legacy, unsupported versions of the platform. With the new world, vendor platforms are updated daily, with a guarantee that those changes will A, not interrupt any of the processes you're running at the moment, so no downtime, and B, most importantly, it will not affect any of the code you've written. So the customizations or the extensions you've got on top of a vendor's technology isn't going to be broken by the latest update. So moving to this new world, a tech approach puts an end to this upgrade cycle and the costs that come with that. So one of the main things I hear from customers and what they say to us is that you have future-proofed our business by not having this nightmare or this tsunami or this almost a re-platform every 3 to 5 years. In terms of Burberry, it's got the new world aims. Some of these we've covered. So own the experience was key. Use data to drive insights, personalization, customized experiences. Take a best of breed approach with limited vendor lock-in. Maintain flexibility of the business by being an API first business. Be agile and responsive to changing customer demands is key. Always be on, so never have any downtime, and sort of also linked to that is dynamically scale. So only pay for the resources that you're using, and make sure you never have any issues around scaling. So number 3, the migration story, slightly different for Burberry than it was for Lego. Burberry went for more kind of a horizontal rather than a vertical strategy at first. They decided to tackle their customer service hub first, which was a tool used by internal sales agents to take orders by the phone and also helped power their VIP personal shopper kind of experience. It was a bit of a microcosm of the website itself, all the same sort of functionality, and could be tackled at low risk. They launched that a few months ago, and then they've gone on now to kind of tackle the full main website. I think they're doing in the same order as Lego, but they're using this template and this kind of experience they've built from the customer service hub to then be able to launch the full website much quicker. Big difference between Lego and Burberry is the services they're consuming from Commerce Tools. Where Lego wanted to use as much as Commerce Tools as possible, Burberry had a very clear view on what they saw as commerce, and therefore came from Commerce Tools. And what they saw as other, which they wanted to consume from different vendors or leave in existing solutions. For example, search, CMS, DAM, identity management, and PIM were all seen as separate to commerce. That's one of Commerce Tools' I think biggest advantages, is that all our APIs are decoupled, can be consumed individually, and can be priced separately. So you only have to pay for what you use. Unlike monoliths, where most businesses actually use a very tiny part of that monolith, but have to still pay for all of it. So as I say, Commerce Tools has a PIM, has identity management, has search, has a basic DAM out of the box, but they did not have to use that functionality from us, which is testament kind of to the flexibility of the platform. A few lessons learned from Burberry, I think. On the localization point, it's obviously really key to have a data center near your customers for that speedy response times. And then they had to have a separate system which kind of collected all the data from all the other 3 different platforms. And what I think that they really didn't realize up front was each country has its own data laws. And so there's limits to the amount of data you can share across the US, China, and Europe. And so they had some edge cases around a US customer coming to a UK store and then kind of how you deal with that. But overall, the kind of the speed and response for 99.9% of their customers was worth some of those challenges around the data piece. Another challenge the developers had at Burberry is they used to have their own instance of ATG, and so they were used to being able to get into the guts of their e-commerce platform and sort of hack the code within it. With us in the new world, it's very different. You have APIs, you can build extensions, and they're separate pieces of code that you own and maintain, but you can't write code to our platform. And initially, I think it took them, they felt a little bit like their hands were taken off the wheel a little bit. And I think, but now as they realized the value of the scalability and sort of and particularly the stability of a platform, how important it is to have that lockdown functionality. And then sort of finally, having to build a lot of the edge cases themselves. They're coming from a monolith. Monoliths are very powerful. They have a lot of functionality out of the box, but because of what they are, they're very tightly coupled and really can affect kind of the flexibility of a platform. Whereas Commerce Tools by choice is lean. It is just the core commerce functionality. We don't know if we're going to be used for a telco like AT&T or automotive like Volkswagen. So if you've got functionality which is very specific to your business, you have to build and extend our platform. So at first, I think they saw that as quite a big challenge. And actually, I think the feedback we got from later was, by the time actually out of the box functionality from these monoliths, by the time you configure it and by the time you customize it to fit your business, actually sometimes it's easier to build. And there tends to be swings and roundabouts. Yes, you have to build more, but also you don't need to hack around the functionality that comes with the monolith to get the stuff that you want and get around the stuff you're not using. So it's, again, swings and roundabouts. It's not all glory. I think that's it, really. Let's move on to some of the questions.
That's great. Thank you, James. Yeah, questions, definitely. Whilst Tim takes back control, ready for his summary, we had a couple come in that I think is worth asking now, whilst the case studies are fresh in everybody's minds. The first one that came in was from Audrey, and she asked that you mentioned you work with companies of all sizes. How is a smaller customs experience different from a Burberry or a Lego? So that's really interesting because you've given us some really good examples of a couple of enterprises. What happens if you're a slightly smaller organization?
Yeah, sure. I say we work with all sizes. I think when people get to about 10 million turnover in revenue and they start outgrowing a Magento or Shopify or try to run something headless, that's kind of when we step in. We're not right for everybody. I think if you've got a very vanilla e-commerce case, you're not doing something that's omni-channel, you don't have any edge cases, you're not having to build on top of an existing platform, then perhaps we're not right. Also, if you need to get this technology principle, you don't need to have internal tech teams, but you do need to understand the value of it. And the smaller journey tends to be a bit different. We have a free trial on our website, so you can. One way to separate who's really cloud native and who claims to be cloud native is: can you go to their website? Can you spin up a free environment in minutes? And can you start having a play around? So some of the smaller businesses tend to be a little bit more digitally native. Probably have one or two, maybe three at most developers or technical people. And sometimes they just kind of get started, and they're almost building the platform, and then they could become a customer. And others don't have that tech maturity, and it's like smaller, and they have a really good SI relationship, and the SI gets this and gets why it's a value to them. So it's different. Projects are normally much quicker. There's a lot less legacy. We've had customers deliver full end-to-end replatforms in 2 to 3 months for smaller customers. So it's easier for smaller customers, but also I think smaller customers tend to be less mature from a technical perspective. So that's the reason why I don't see most of them. Our price point is, I say, we're slightly cheaper, I think, than Shopify when you get over 10 million, and we go all the way up to sort of enterprise. So similar strategy, but normally different motivations from smaller customers.
Okay, thank you. That's really good to know. I mean, the next question was related to procurement, but I've got a bunch of those that I'll wrap up for the discussion. But we had one from Andy, and he wants to know, how long does it usually take to implement a Commerce Tools project? Is it more difficult, or does it take longer than all-in-one platform? By that, I assume a monolithic platform. So, timescales, I guess, what are people talking about?
Yeah, people always ask this. It's always like, how long is a piece of string? We've had greenfield positions. There's a company called Kazoo, which is Alex Chesterman's new startup, who set up Zoopla and Love Film, and they launched a very complicated automotive website, which involves buying cars, servicing them, selling them, and they did that in about 2.5 months. You can do it very, very quickly, probably 20 or 30% quicker than Monolith, and it's quicker in different reasons. So you can have a POC or something to show the business in a couple of weeks. You can go onto a website, start a trial, upload some products, and the business can start giving feedback. But because there's less out of the box, you need to build that. And I think I was saying with Burberry, you have to build it, and also, but the story we hear is actually when you look at these monoliths and how you have to work around stuff and configure stuff, actually sometimes it's quicker to build. So we generally hear it is quicker, but you should expect around about the same amount of time as a monolith. But as Tim was saying, you're launching earlier, you're proving value earlier, and also the real goal is about once it's implemented. I think in the last webinar that's recording, we told the story of Simpress, who use us for Vistaprint and all their other brands, and they managed to launch Vistaprint masks, and they went from the first line of code to, I think, many millions of dollars of business, and they did that in 3 weeks. And it just gives you an idea of kind of, once it's in place, the speed you can get.
Okay, that's really interesting. So I guess the takeaways from that are proof of concept, POC. That's really useful in terms of convincing internal stakeholders. And then I guess the other thing that we can take away from that response is the opportunity to roll out the update in stages so that you can test and learn on an iterative basis, as opposed to waiting 12 months and then, as Tim said earlier, hoping when you press the button that it works. Okay, well, that's great. Thank you, James. We'll come back to you during the discussion and Q&A session. Tim, over to you now for a webinar summary. Just before I go, please keep asking your questions. We had some really good ones come through. If we don't get to your question today, we will reach out to you as on an individual basis. Okay, thanks very much. Over to you, Tim.
Thanks, Mike. I've had the webinar summary slides up on the screen just for a few minutes there. I won't labour on this because we're running short of time, but the key one that I think is worth just pulling out is the final bit here to summarise up on the webinar today, and that's that brands are increasingly engaging with customers through a broader range of customer touchpoints, and modules 3 and 4 is really there to help you understand that if that is something that's starting to happen with your brand, or has always been the case, you need to start making informed choices about the technologies that you select if you're thinking about replatforming in the near future, and making sure that those technologies can enable you to to engage efficiently and productively with your customers through all of those channels and touch points that they're demanding in today's modern commerce landscape. Okay, so moving on to just a quick sneak preview of what's coming up next in our Headless program. We have got a couple of more modules that we're going to be launching in July. So modules 5 and 6 really start focusing in on the innovation behind Headless as a technology concept, and also why the API layer is really important to enable Headless in a really powerful way. So look out for those on the 8th of July and the 22nd of July. And we'll be summarizing up those two topics in our third and final webinar on the 29th of July. So we hope to see you all there. And although that's the final webinar, it's not going to be our final event. As I mentioned earlier, we do have our masterclass in London, which we'll be looking to run in October, subject to finding the right venue and adhering to the latest kind of guidance from the government on social distancing rules. So watch this space for more news about that, and we hope to see you all there as well. So I think we have just under 10 minutes left, Mike. Do you want to start filtering through some of those questions?
Yeah, sure. We have actually got a bunch, so we might not get to all of them today. Firstly, we've had a question from somebody about, can we share the links of the previous and current webinar? If you go to the program landing page on the profound.works website, search for Headless in the menu, you will find the program landing page, and that will provide you with links to past modules and the previous webinar recordings. So the first question we have.
Sorry, Mike, on that point, we're probably going to send out an email, aren't we, once the recording's ready anyway?
That'll have this session's recording, and if you want the previous session, then it's on the landing page. It's on the program page. And I think the first question we've had in from Pete today, this is one for you, Tim, a bit open-ended, but how do I prioritize the data I tend to migrate? How would somebody tackle that?
Okay, wow. I guess it really comes down to your approach to your migration. If you're doing a phased approach, because you're probably wanting to tackle those high-value pain points first, then that will really help inform the order that you need to migrate data. Typically, we usually see that in this situation, it's product information that gets migrated first, because it kind of underpins pretty much most of the shopping experience. But it's not always the case. Sometimes it's customer data. And as I said before, it really comes down to, if you're doing a phased approach, you've got to make sure that you're prioritizing your data migration based upon the stages of your implementation, and making sure it's migrated in time for when you're actually going to be turning on those new experiences that need that data.
Okay, thank you. A tough one, but a good answer. Now, well, the next one is really interesting. It's come up a couple of times, and I think this is one for you, James, actually. It's all about procurement. How does using a modern approach like Headless mean that the procurement process will also evolve? I think that's how in the old days we're used to procuring a big bang project, so we're looking for a big chunk of capital expenditure from the finance department or the procurement team. What is tackling it on a headless basis, so more iterative? How does that change the procurement process in your experience, James?
Yeah, interesting question. Yeah, it's definitely changing. We see less and less RFPs, more and more POCs. I think which businesses are becoming aware of the monoliths and their very slick presentations and their promises, and then the reality is very different, and they present a very unified, connected monolith, and actually a lot of it's through acquisition. And when you get into actually building, you realize these systems aren't really integrated with each other, and people have had so much nightmares, then they want to get past that quickly. So now with cloud systems, I was saying before, you can spin up environments very quickly, and they want to really test, pick some complicated use cases and test those. We still get RFPs. We actually turn down a lot of RFPs if they come to us and they haven't really got the technology approach, and they're asking about all the front end, all the different functionality, and they don't realize that's now provided by best of breed, so there'll be different people doing different things. We kind of push back and say, this is RFP isn't for us. Ironically, we've won quite a lot of those ones. It normally creates a new conversation internally, and they come back and they say, well, we want to learn, and that works. So still see some RFPs. We prefer to talk people out of it. We'll do a very short one to kind of tick the boxes, but we don't really answer 4, 5, 6, 700 line items. We say get in and prove it, and work with your SI. And we've had often sometimes head to head. So Burberry, it was us versus Elastic Path, and that was sort of a hackathon. And at the end of it, they realized really what was important to them, and they picked us. So yeah, it's definitely changing. I think procurement has to be aware of that, and it's better rather than doing, it's more that thinking organization to a doing organization, rather than just relying on SI's word for it. Actually, get them to prove it. That's the big change.
If I can just jump in there, actually, we've actually been doing that quite a lot recently. We've had 3 projects, I think, in the last 12 months where actually we were engaged to do POC instead of our RFP. And the great thing about that was that we actually ended up with a level of quality at the end of POC that actually enabled us to go straight into final delivery stages. So go back to the question earlier about how much faster can you move with headless technologies. If you can get your mindset right and your thinking right, and you ask for your SI or agency to help you with the POC, it can actually drastically shorten your project life cycle, because you're doing a lot of that preparatory work and proving work in that POC, and that code is valuable and it can feed straight into the actual final implementation work as well. And I think we shortened one project by about 4 months by doing that, and another by a couple. So yeah, it's a real valid kind of alternative to that traditional kind of laborious RFP process that we see people get real value from.
Okay, so clearly there's benefits for the admin processing procurement side of managing a digital estate, as well as on the technology side by adopting headless strategy. That's really interesting. General announcement, everyone. It looks like we're coming to the end of the webinar. However, the team's happy to continue for another 5 minutes or so. If you've got to go, that's fine. We'll send you a link to the recording. But if you want to hang on for another few minutes, we've got 3 or 4 more questions that we're going to cover. So next of which is it's another interesting one, actually. That's coming from a member of the audience. It's about the level of maintenance that's required for a feature or a site once it's rolled out. I mean, how complex is the maintenance required? And also, quite a pertinent question, what level of support is available from your average vendor, specifically James? So this is probably one for you. What sort of support does Commerce Stores provide once its features or site has been rolled out?
Yeah, good question. I mean, primarily we're a product company, so we do not implement the technology. It's, I say, 90% implemented by SIs, and then probably about 10% by internal teams. And the feedback we get that there is a level of complexity implementing it, but the maintenance is much simpler. You can work, you're working on separate services, and you don't need to worry about whatever you do. So if you want to maintain the front end, you can push live daily and test and learn. This idea that people used to come from, some people used to have quarterly release cycles, or monthly if they're lucky. So if you wanted to test a bit of front end functionality, you only got 12 times to do that in a year. Whereas our customers are pushing live once a day, once every 2 days. And so in a couple of weeks, you can get to the same point. It'll take you a whole year. So the maintenance is a bit simpler, I think. What kind of support does CT offer? We're very simple contracts. It's a set price, and you get all support is included. All the hosting is included. Everything's included. There's no sort of surprises there. And we offer support. We offer training for development teams. I think that's key. We do a lot of support around data modeling. That's the big thing that you have to do when you move to a headless system, is kind of look at your data model. It's not worth just porting what's in your PIM at the moment and putting it across. You need to think about how kind of the responsiveness of that. And then we also do check-in services where we validate some of the integrations that you've already done. And we do that for SIs, and we do it in-house. But mainly it's the SI that has the answer to in terms of how difficult maintenance is. It's them who will be to be managing the platform going forward.
Okay, so hopefully that's given you the answer you need. Okay, we've got Sophie has asked us, and this is again, it's a good question and possibly quite a large one, but I'm going to throw it at you, Tim. It's how does migration affect UX?
Okay, apologies, there's a train going past in the background, so there might be some background noise. Hope you can hear me okay. So was that, does migration affect, how does migration affect UX?
I'm guessing the context for that is someone's going through a platform migration, and how does that, I guess, impact on customer or user experience during and after?
Sure. So I guess if you're going for a phased approach, so slowly retiring your kind of monolithic platform one experience at a time, then you will need to pay real attention to the customer experience or user experience and make sure that it makes sense and it isn't jarring, particularly where the two worlds may collide. So, you know, you may implement a new checkout first, but continue to use the product search and nav on the previous platform. You've got to make sure that that handoff between those two worlds actually doesn't feel jarring or is even, you know, invisible to the customer. So that's the thing in terms of impacting the UX. If it's not handled properly and you don't have a good design team thinking about how to manage that experience through that phased approach, because you're probably going to double back on the experiences as you bring more stuff online. You're going to want to be updating the experiences that are eligible to be updated as more and more of your platform gets retired and new stuff comes online. So it will affect the UX, but actually with a good design team and a good UX head, you can mitigate it and plan for it. And actually we often don't see there being any kind of drop off in conversion rates just because you're doing a phased approach, as long as you are paying attention to those experiences where those worlds cross over.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Tim. And I think we've probably got time for one more question now, and that has been asked again by, sorry, Pete, I skipped over a couple of your previous questions, but here's one I think we can fit in. What are the benefits an external agency will bring if we already have the people in-house? So if you've got your developer team, how can, well, I guess an agency like Profound help? Tim.
Okay. I guess it really does depend on what kind of work that development team is doing. In our experience, you know, an agency partner will normally get you to where you want to be faster, because we usually see that those internal teams are almost always kind of dedicated to business as usual activities. So it's that kind of life support and maintenance activities. And because there is so much work to do for those teams in looking after that kind of stuff, it doesn't often give them the capacity to scale out to support a brand new project. So we would normally find ourselves engaged to kind of get customers to a point where we can hand off to the internal team and they can absolutely be involved and augment the delivery team based upon how much capacity they have. But yeah, we normally see agencies like ourselves being used just to get the projects delivered and live, and then hand off to the internal teams to take it from there. And hopefully at that point, they've gone for a microservices architecture, they'll actually be liberated from that low value work that we discussed earlier and actually be more able to work on interesting stuff moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Tim. I think that's probably all we have time for today. I know a couple of you have got questions that we didn't get to in today's session. We will reach out to you privately and directly. Just a reminder that you will get an email after this, probably in the next day or so, with a link to the recording for this webinar. Go to the Profound website, profound.works, look for the headless menu option. You'll find the program landing page, and there you'll find the modules, the white papers, and the recording of webinar 1. Our next webinar is in 4 weeks' time. Keep an eye out for from the outbound emails, and you'll also be receiving your details of modules 5 and 6, as Tim highlighted earlier. So I guess all that remains is to say a big thank you to our presenters today, to Tim McMillan of Profound and James Dye of Commerce Tools. Thank you both. Really appreciate your time today. And thank you to the audience. Thank you all, our students. Thanks for being so interactive and for those great questions that you've asked. So have a great day, everybody, and look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks' time. Thank you. Bye-bye now.